I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska, as well as the office in Sydney, Australia. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on April 10th, 2018. Call to Coach is a resource for those that want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room available for you right below the main video window. If you just look down there, there's a login button, bottom left-hand corner. Choose that. Choose the guest account. Don't create a new one. Just choose the guest one. Take it out where it says guest and the number. Put your name in there and join us live. We'd love to have your questions live during this webcast. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, you can send us an email for that as well, coaching@gallup.com. Really, that's really the best way to get a hold of us for any questions you have, or use the contact form right there on the live page. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com for all your Clifton Strengths coaching resources and training needs. And don't forget, you can catch all the video in both streaming and downloadable audio. We call that podcasting for offline listening or on the road, in a train, on a plane. You can catch that as well as our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. One more thing, don't forget, rate and review. If you're using Apple Podcasts or the Google Play, rate and review us there. Love to have you do that. You can subscribe on YouTube. Just hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. Important way to know that we are live. Or if you're on Spreaker, like us. All those things are appreciated. Ann Lingenfelter is our host today. She works as a learning solutions consultant with Gallup in our Sydney, Australia office. And Ann, it's always a delight to be on with you on Call to Coach. Welcome back.
Thanks so much, Jim. It's great to be here. You know, I was thinking as I was preparing for our guest today that when I very first started working for Gallup, I started having conversations with people, and I found that two industries in particular, I found so much appetite and enthusiasm for strengths, and that was education and faith-based organizations. Today, my guest is Daniela Duarte, and she is from the Hillsong organization, which is a large church here in Australia. It's not just in Australia, it has 60 global locations, as a matter of fact. Daniela is the Organizational Development Manager for Hillsong Church. Her role requires her to develop innovative and impactful approaches to leadership development and talent management across the 20 Australian locations. She has about 1,000 staff across Australia in Hillsong and an army of volunteers that she works with. Daniela is passionate about transformational change and believes that a key factor in sustainable success is engaging with individual leadership potential at every level. She believes that clarity and purpose and passion is at the heart of the significant sustainable change for every person and organization. Daniela holds an undergraduate degree in human resource development, and she's currently completing her executive master's in business administration. In fact, I think she has about 8 days left before she's finished with that. So good on you, Daniela. Strengths-based development and the Clifton Strengths has been at the heart of the current work that Daniela is doing with Hillsong. She has seen many people and teams empowered to achieve more in their roles, ministries, and personal lives, and she's here to talk about it today. Daniela, welcome to Call to Coach. I'm so pleased that you could join us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here.
Daniela's top 5, because people are going to want to know straight up, are activator, strategic, maximizer, ideation, and self-assurance.
That's
yes.
Right.
And Daniela, people always want to know how you came across strengths. People are always interested in how did you find out about it, and was it a massive aha moment for you? So can you start off there?
Yeah. It's actually quite interesting. In 2008, I was teaching at our Hillsong International Leadership College, and just I think an interested student put the StrengthsFinder 2.0 book in front of me and said, you should check this out. And I did. And it was a journey, actually, of picking it up, then putting it back down. And then when I went into learning and development, I started to use it with a small team, and thought the results were quite intriguing, and the take-up that people had with it was special, I thought. And then look, when I started to learn a lot more about coaching and emotional intelligence, I referred back to it. And since that day, that was 2012, I have been all about StrengthsFinder. I really do believe it is the number one tool to help people grow their emotional intelligence.
Yeah, fantastic. Kind of a random question, but do you know that person, the student who put it in front of you? Is that someone that you're still in contact with and is still active with it as well? Or was it someone that you don't even remember now? It was just a student that passed it to you?
Look, to be honest, I don't remember. Them.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. People always remember how they found out about it. I know for me, it was a real aha moment for sure. And it's always wonderful to see that happen with folks. And I'm sure that you have lots of stories today that you can talk about, both in your congregation and in your staff and in your volunteer base as well. But before we go into some of those stories, I have to say congratulations, because I've just been told that the new Hillsong album that was released, last week or something, called There Is More, it's gone to #1 on the charts, right?
Wow, I just heard that, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, so someone who's a member of your community told me that, and sounds like that it's just had a huge splash, and so that's really exciting.
That's exciting.
I mean, I haven't heard any of the music, but I mean, most everyone in the world has heard some Hillsong music at some point in time, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel pretty blessed. I hear it every Sunday, so I am very grateful for that.
Yeah. Just to give a little bit of context before we dig into the strengths aspect, can you, for those who are not familiar with Hillsong, most people may know of it as a church, but can you talk a little bit about the music aspect of that, of Hillsong, and the community and the power and impact that that's had?
I mean, I think I'd probably talk about it from a recipient of that, as a member of the congregation. I can tell you that every time a new album comes on, I find it personally impacting. I'm able to share it with friends and family who are not faith-based, and they will always take it up and listen to it daily until the next album's out. I feel like it's the kind of music that, for me personally, just fills me with positivity and brings me to another place. I think recently we did win an award, a Grammy, for one of our songs. And I think the most loveliest thing that I heard on that was our songwriter stand up in front of thousands and say that, it was all about bringing people closer to God, which really is what our music is about. The impact is huge, and I don't think it was ever planned.
Yeah. Well, I've had the opportunity, the very wonderful opportunity, to attend a couple of Hillsong events with you, Daniela, and also just separately with other people in my life. And I've always been blown away by the level of professionalism and how amazing they are. They're really incredibly slick and impactful and emotionally connecting and all of that. So it is quite an experience, something I think everyone should attend and be able to see, to experience, as you say, even just to understand, because I think Hillsong is one of those organizations that can be in the press about this or that at times. And I think that a lot of times, especially folks who are not, don't come from a place of faith, they may not be aware of the enormous amount of good work that Hillsong does as far as outreach efforts and things like that, like City Care. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about, maybe that's where we start talking about strengths. So I'm assuming that strengths is used in some capacity through City Care and through some of the outreach. Am I off base there, or is that right?
It's with City Care, which is our community development arm. I know that our teams within City Care have used strengths for themselves as caseworkers. As some people out there might know, I was in community development work myself for about 15 years, and it can be personally challenging. It's one of those environments that are known as high emotional labor environments. People are giving out continuously. And I know that City Care was one of the first places that we took up strengths. And what we saw was this instant, a sense of empowerment, I think, that people had when they did their strengths, that they heard again that they had specific talents that were valued and that they were bringing that to their communities. I think being able to be self-aware, but not from a blind spot space, but from wow, this is what I contribute. This is special. This is unique. And I know that they have passed that on to their volunteers. We have a lot of volunteers. So in City Care alone, you can be looking at 500 volunteers. So that's sort of where it began. Just going back to the music, we've had letters from people who hear our music from a prison environment. And so I think that for us, our goal is to give people a message of hope and purpose. And I feel that one of the reasons that StrengthsFinder had such a huge take-up in our Hillsong Church is that it aligns perfectly with that. So now it's actually a tool that people use to crystallize their sense of purpose. And I think, that's one of the ways we've used it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked to, whether it's teachers in education, not-for-profits or faith-based organizations, that some of the common themes that we hear from employees in those arenas is that they are working sacrificially. I mean, it really can be, real when they're purpose-driven, passionate, mission-driven, they really can go above and beyond to the point where it's sometimes you need something that can be uplifting and strengths being based in positive psychology and talking about what you are empowered with and what you do have the ability to bring, I think can be the sort of message that helps you keep showing up every day, even when in environments like the City Care, where sometimes the needle moves ever so slightly in the work that you're doing, right? So absolutely. When you're talking about strengths being so embraced by the Hillsong community and how it's aligned, I'd love to hear you talk more about that, because some churches that I talk to feel that anything that's not entirely biblically based is not appropriate for them to be focusing on or using. Is that a discussion that has ever come into Hillsong, and how has that been addressed, if so?
Yeah, so let me also clarify that when I say Hillsong, obviously I love that term that individuals don't change. Organizations don't change, but individuals change. And that journey of being aware and then desiring something new and gaining knowledge about that, and then the ability to use it, is a journey that each individual goes on. So I've been committed to that for 5 years. So when we talk about Hillsong, I'd say that I've talked to individuals who you would call individual contributors. I've talked to frontline managers, I've talked to middle managers, and then there have been some executive leaders. So it's interesting that from that array, there's been those who have completely embraced it straight away and were very intuitive. This is part of who we are. This is purpose-driven. This is going to help me. And then, of course, there are those, sometimes probably because of their strengths filter, Anne. They might have a bit of deliberative going on, a bit of analytical, and they're wanting to know the why. And does this align to my faith? To be honest, what I found very easy working with Gallup is the tremendous work that you have all done in providing a great platform for that. So we took the book that Alan Wiseman wrote on finding your strengths, which actually you gifted to us when we first started, and we just got that out there, and I think our people being able to see scripture aligned to that helped them to adapt that. Others have not. I wouldn't call them early adopters. They've taken their time. I think language is a big killer for any organization. It can slip through our fingers. And so at first, the idea of strengths and weakness got caught up in the faith area because there is scriptures around weakness, strength. But in the end, I think we've all realized we're actually on the same page. This is about taking your gifting, your talent as a human, and aligning that to God's purpose and blessing others with it. So even balconies and basements has actually worked for us, not against us, because we've started using it from the angle of, you're here to bless others around you. So sometimes your strengths, when they're at that basement level, they're actually hindering that. And how can you bless people around you by getting better at knowing your strengths and using those? So I think in terms of change management, the whole time it's been around aligning our language or strengths language with a faith-based language. But I think that would be the same in any industry. We spent a good 2 years just putting strengths out there, doing it. We did 700 coaching conversations in 18 months.
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic.
And 50 workshops in that first year. In fact, I remember doing my accreditation course, Anne, and I think it's my number one activator. I finished on Friday and I went to run a session on a Monday with 20 staff. But the tools speak for themselves, right? So it wasn't hard. Yeah, so I think that's it. But I won't say that we haven't had a challenge. We have. Yeah. I don't think, though, that it's a faith-based challenge. I think it's the challenge that humans have when they are a collective. Yeah.
No, it's interesting because I think that there's a lot of the issues that you're talking about are absolutely the sorts of things that we hear from all sorts of industries, right? Yes, I do. When I've talked to, especially some churches in the States that I've been in touch with, some of the work in the areas that they've brought strengths in really effectively have been in, like, they'll run courses or classes or counseling for young couples who are about to get married. And so they'll bring strengths into premarital counseling. They'll use it at times of transition. So if you're graduating from high school, going to college, that's a time when it can be used. Or if there's, issues in a marriage and to help understand and have some insights into your partner, it's been used there as well. Are you guys using it in those spaces as well, or if not, what other spaces are you using it?
So I can tell you 2 individual stories. We have a gentleman who is in one of our Sydney campuses, and he is part of our pastoral care chaplaincy team. He's a wonderful gentleman. Alan Brown is his name, and he is one of our accredited strengths coaches. Alan passionately loves strengths. He has shared with many, so I'm sure he won't mind, that he gets up at 5 to read strengths material, and we'll read that up until 8, probably 5 days a week.
Wow.
So you can imagine that he has a lot of passion. And the wonderful thing with that is he's actually piloting some workshops that he's doing with married couples, helping married couples better understand their relationship dynamics. Now, it's early days, but the results he's sharing are fantastic in terms of we all, if we're married, we know that those challenges can come up, but coming from a point of the same, not difference. So that's worked tremendously. Just 5 weeks ago, as Hillsong Church, we've been sort of wrestling with how can we provide. We had 77,000 visitors to Hillsong Church over Easter.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, of course, we're wrestling with how can we get material that's helpful? How can we get people connected as fast as we can? And so our lead pastor in Australia, Joel Abell, he's designed an app called Engage. And people can actually just download that app, and from home, from their own comfortable space, they can go on these journeys of engaging with the faith, engaging with various things. But one of the sessions we wrote into that on purpose was engaging with your talent and with your strengths.
Awesome.
And so we are have encouraged people to connect with the Clifton Strength Finder through that as a way of discovering their purpose. So those 2 exciting, I think, recent stories that I've heard. And there's probably many more. I also spoke to a young lady who lives in Brisbane, and she's saving up to do the strengths accreditation with her part-time job. But she's also been just telling everyone she can about StrengthsFinder, getting people to look up the Gallup Theme Thursdays. I would call her an evangelist. So, yeah, like those kind of stories are just, I feel, everywhere. Yeah.
It's really interesting. I love that idea of the app and bringing that, exposing those folks to strengths, because some of the conversations that I've also had with client churches who are using strengths have talked about the fact that people who would never come to church, in their world, they just, it's not where they would go, but they will come to church for a workshop on strengths. and
Right.
it's sort of like a side door, instead of coming in through the front door on a Sunday, they'll come to a cell group study, and then they stay, but it's a less, in some ways, it's a less threatening, entree into that environment. And it can be quite powerful. And as you were talking about the Living Your Strengths book that Al Weinsman wrote, and there's a CD series with that. There's actually a cell group study that's already been created that's around strengths, living your strengths. And I remember when I first started working for Gallup, my sister-in-law in Seattle was doing that at her church at the same time that I first started working. So it was, I said, I'm working with this cool thing called strengths, and she said, I know all about that because I'm doing it as a cell group study. So there are lots of creative ways to be using it out there, for sure.
Exactly right. And I think the more that people join the strengths journey, they just add their talents to creating new ways of getting it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So from an organization perspective, as far as thinking about now kind of shifting away from clients, or not clients, but I was thinking about volunteers or congregation, but thinking now more about your own staff. Do you use it with your leaders? I mean, you said that you coached your frontline managers. Once you have a one-on-one session with them, do they then take it back to their teams? How do they use it in sort of the day in and day out of work life at Hillsong?
Yeah. So we have integrated it into a what we call a people with purpose framework. Strengths is the first component of that, understanding your talents, understanding your strengths. And then we've aligned with the Korn Ferry competency model, actually. And we are early days into synthesizing the idea of having strengths, and then the idea of using and aiming those at particular competencies. And we're also designing an internal framework around, I would say, discipleship/coaching. So we're all working at the architecture and design of that at the moment. We have a slightly larger team than we did. And so we're aiming to have that rolling out to 3 of our campuses by mid-year next year, where we're actually able to integrate those 3 things all at once.
Interesting.
Because we had to sit back and think, okay, what's the aim of what we're doing here? Is the aim to sell StrengthsFinder, or is the aim to integrate competencies? And we had to step back and say, no, the aim is that our staff, 1,000 staff, would have the same experience that we want the rest of our congregation to have, which is to enjoy their life, not endure it, and live with purpose. And then when we married the Q12 into this, we started realizing that development and the clarity of expectation, what is expected of you as a leader, is where we then brought in competencies. So it's early days, but 3 of our campuses, we are now integrating strengths as part 1. So how do we do that? We run strengths workshops, first of all, within the campus with all the staff, and we use it for team synergy. And we use the team grid, the strengths grid. We use the insight photo cards in our workshops. They work a treat, people when they can visually see how they represent. We actually use the talents in action cards that you can get in the Team CliftonStrengths conversation pack. And we rip those up and we get everybody to tell each other how they add value. I just love attending any of those workshops because people come out understanding each other. In Christian circles, we talk about honoring each other. But sometimes when you're working with each other day in, day out, it's a bit tough. But I think that being able to pick the balcony of every strength has integrated that with teams, and they just all of a sudden have great team relationships very quickly. So we do that. And then we pick some middle managers, so some key leaders. In our world, we would call them leaders of leaders of leaders. And we do their All 34. And then we go to the pairing book and we basically prepare for them what's called a talent mix. And we start to talk to them about their domains of strength, not just their talents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we give them 5 sessions of one-on-one, and we aim that at one of their competencies. And then, of course, as we start to develop these performance coaches, we're planning to have this model that just basically stays on the campus without us.
Yes, right.
Yeah. I would say if you looked at the ADKAR model of change, so awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement.
Yes. Right.
1,000-strong community, I would say that we are just past desire. So we've been working on awareness for quite a long time, and we definitely have the desire. And now what we're actually doing is weaving in knowledge on all of our campuses. And I'm believing for more strengths accredited coaches by the end of next year, Anne.
That's good. It sounds like you're going to need them. You know, it's so funny. It's so funny, Daniela, to hear you talking about this big picture, because I see your strategic just coming to full force, because it's in your the way you describe it. It's so clear. You know, the vision that you have and the journey where you're going is so mapped out and so clear. And that's really, really cool to see. It's you're bringing in so many different elements. And when we were talking yesterday before the show, you talked about one of your learnings through the last 5 years has been that change is slow, and bringing something like this in is slow. And I think that that's a really important point for us to talk about to all the people who are listening, who are trying to bring this in a whole organization approach the way you are, because what that means is not just that you have to be patient and trusting and believe that this is going to progress, but also managing other people around you, you know, who may expect that things are supposed to, you know, you're going to see immediate results and right? How do you maintain your own expectations about this growing, and also manage the expectations of other people outside who may be saying, well, we're spending money on this or that. What's the ROI, for, you know, to use a corporate term?
Yeah. No, that speaks to me already. Look, I think 3 things. The competency called perspective, which I'll talk about, my own strengths coming into play, and then, being able to speak the language of metrics is the 3 that I've gleaned in the last 5 years. So in terms of perspective, I leaning onto the, you know, Korn Ferry competency framework. One of the competencies that is there, but there's a lot of research at the moment on some of the key competencies that executives do gain a lot from. And one of those is the competence of perspective. You know, sometimes as organizations, I think doing my MBA has helped, because I thought that as Hillsong, we were the only ones that were struggling here, and realized, oh, hold on a moment, all organizations are actually going through this. So we can get so focused on getting our internal KPIs happening, on, you know, meeting those internal goals, that we actually forget as senior leaders and middle management to sit back and look outside our organizations and get perspective. What is happening globally? You know, there is a war on talent. McKinsey's will tell us that. And so I think for myself, I purposely went out and looked for people who could give me perspective. And at times, I think they've kept me on the journey, because there are times in change that you think, this is just not going to happen. That perspective then helped me realize that perhaps it wasn't that I just couldn't get, I was convinced I couldn't get support for my department. Then I realized that a lot of learning and development departments struggle because we are a cost center. And so just learning and I'm still learning to speak the level of the language of metrics that even our board would be able to see at a glimpse. This is the return on investment that engagement is bringing to our people. The Q12 that we are doing right now, being able to tell a narrative and a story around that and take that all the way up, linking it to our vision about empowering young leaders. So then being able to say, well, this is how the Q12 does that. This is how many coaching conversations we have done. This is our Q12 result at the moment. And some of our results we are extremely proud of. I think when it comes to in some of our departments or campuses, living for or working for a cause larger than myself, we compared to 98% of the global database there. And when we asked our people why, it was about our incredible belief culture. And we have something every week called staff meeting. But then we also got some not so good ones, which I won't share the score. But that actually speaks to our senior leadership who can't be on everything. So perspective, language of metrics. And then my Strengths Finder, activator number 1, Alan Brown himself told me I should slow down a bit. It might take a few more years.
Excellent. Excellent. You talked before about the millennial tactics with coaching and some things that you had learned about how to coach millennials effectively. Love to hear a bit about that learning, Daniela.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I think it was, Anne, that Gallup had the millennial seminar.
Yep.
And we sent one of our young millennials in our team, Ariana Mason, and she went along to that and came back with confirmation, actually personal confirmation that she was normal and that this was the phenomenon that is happening for young people. And I think that what we took from that was 7 key characteristics that we built into the way we coach. And that is that millennials, they don't necessarily always focus on the past of their career, but they want to see the future. Where are they going? Where are we going? The fact that they are very passionate about articulating their purpose. And so we've actually weaved that into our development program, being able to ask a millennial, help a millennial map out, what is my purpose? What am I here for? And that sounds so easy, but it's actually quite hard to clarify and scary sometimes because then you've got to own it. Yeah. So there's that. And then, of course, that they want development and they want to feel like they're developing into that purpose. Coaching versus bosses. So we're on a 3-year journey and it's going to take a while, but probably shifting our leaders from just being the boss type archetype leader to the techniques of coaching and having touch points with millennials that are more regular and that are more supportive. The last Korn Ferry research I read said that only 3% of managers have that development style. So it's definitely a shift in culture that we're working at. And then just the idea of focusing on their strengths. They love to hear what they are good at, according to the research. So not generalizing if you're a millennial out there. And I think tying that into the fact that this is their life. They don't work for a job. They work for finding purpose and fulfillment. So for us, I'm a standard coaching session with a millennial leader. We have 6 sessions. And session number 1 is we call it energy, how to keep it high. And so we've actually produced a tool just gleaning from all the fantastic strength stuff, but we call them an energy card. And they help you to work out how do you maximize your emotional energy? How do you keep it high? Well, that's by knowing your self-awareness of what drains it and owning that. So we take them through a session there. We use rewards. And what does that mean? So we purchase the motivation cards from Gallup and we take them on a journey of owning, what do I personally find rewarding? And is that okay if I'm a minister of religion? Is that okay if I'm a pastor? Then we take them through, what do I really value? It sounds so easy to have that session, but a lot of people, including myself, find it hard to crystallize that. We only want them to actually live by 3. And what does that look like?
Wow.
And then number 4 is we use the Korn Ferry competencies, but we align them with the basements of StrengthsFinder. And we ask the question, as a leader of leaders, what could derail you? What competencies, if you don't if you're not even aware of these derailers, could derail you? Even personal learning, a lack of personal learning. And then what we do is we look at their strengths and see how could we get them back up to balconies so that we can strengthen that for you.
Yeah.
And then the last 2, we just call them, we put their name in there. So Michael, and we just write, how do you change a nation? Just something small. And we just give them their talent mix, which is the combination of the pairing book on their top 10. And we take them through a journey of understanding what's the flavor that they bring as a senior leader. So that's something we've designed specifically for millennial leaders in our world. Yeah.
It's excellent. I love hearing about the blend of the Korn Ferry competencies and the Gallup strengths. So interestingly enough, I have a couple of clients who happen to use the 2 hand in hand. And and so you're the second one that I've heard of that. Sounds like it might be a case study in the making. I think it could be pretty impactful to see, to gather some data about how that goes. I'd love to author a case study on that. Sounds very, very, very interesting. Daniela, I know that you have also been asked by Hillsong to travel to other global locations, to other campuses globally. And there's you said 60 campuses across the world, and talk about strengths. So how has that experience been for you? When you go to these different locations, are you finding similar issues and responses in those locations to your strengths work that you do here? Just love to have a bit of an idea of how that experience has been for you.
Yeah. So at the moment, we're working with our New York campus. So our New York campus has approximately 30 staff these days, but they run on a huge army of volunteers. And because they are a fairly new campus, one of the things, I guess you would liken it to a small business, where in a small business, you do everything. If you're selling cakes, you make them, you do the accounting, you do everything. So our 30 staff, they do everything. Some of them work full time, some of them work casual. So I feel like when we first went out there, there was a little bit of fatigue potentially, which we can all have. And I noticed that the StrengthsFinder program just straight away just gave them that sense of I think that it was like someone was patting them on the back and saying, you know what, you're doing a good job, and what you've got in your hand is enough, and you can use that to keep living big, or living large, as we call it. So I saw a lot of very transparent conversation instantly with small leadership teams. I did notice that people I feel very safe with StrengthsFinder, because they're not about to hear what they're not good at, right? I think we all know that.
Yes, that's right.
And I think when people are working really hard, that's probably not what they want to hear. And so I felt like that was just an open, arms open, invited back. I have a young lady there who's also saving for her accreditation program, and has got a whole bunch of people doing their assessments and pointing them in the right direction. We have a young man who went to India after college at Hillsong College in Sydney, went to one of our strengths workshops, became an accredited coach, and is now the coach for the San Francisco Hillsong.
Wow, awesome.
So, it's slowly getting out there, yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. So from your perspective, this is sort of, pie in the sky thinking, just the greatest thing that you can imagine. What's next for you? If you could just make anything happen in the strengths, in the way of strengths at Hillsong, what would that be?
Yeah, wow. I just have to be careful with what I put out there.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, I know. I'll do a little one, then I'll do a big one.
Okay.
I would like to go to the Gallup Strengths Summit. So I
Oh,
try and get there.
absolutely.
That's that
Jim
one.
would be happy to see you there, right, Jim?
Indeed.
I'd love to eventually see accredited strengths coaches on every campus. I'd like to see those ongoing development conversations that each leader has using coaching techniques as just the way we do things around here, with all of our staff.
Yeah.
And look, we are a very big coaching culture already. Pastor Brian would tell you that. I just think that, and this is only my opinion, but I think that sitting on the cusp of a millennial generation and how they are inspired to grow, what I would love to see is some more techniques around getting those millennials to grow their leadership capabilities by using StrengthsFinder, by using Korn Ferry, and using coaching technique.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Jim, as we start to wind down, are there anything that you wanted to add or questions out there?
Yeah, and one of my own is I don't want all the millennials to have all the good training, by the way. The Xers and we like that stuff too. So don't forget about that. There's been a couple questions from the chat room. One, in the work that you've done, have you seen belief a common theme there at Hillsong? That's one of those. Have you? And how does it play out? I mean, it's such a common. My wife has belief very, very high, and so I've seen it in our family and how it works. How does that work when it's high in and I hate to say this, but it's a corporate setting, right? We still have people working together where two or more gather, there will be conflict. So how does that play out in a big corporate setting when you have that kind of theme that's kind of playing throughout the group?
Yeah, look, the first thing I think of straight away is the idea of the difference between dialogue and appreciative inquiry when we're trying to get to an end goal in conversation, and then the idea of telling. I feel like people with high belief can come across as those who tell or sell an idea, and they can come across as wanting to have their point seen very quickly. Whereas I think that collaborative cultures now work better, where people can stand back from that belief and be willing to just put it up for analysis. So I feel like in our environment, we all are quite keen to tell each other what we think about things. Yes. With high belief.
And I think too, it can lend to, when it's done right, in a team environment, it can lend to not a person being in charge, but a mission or a purpose being in charge. And so those things are guided by common sets of values. And so sometimes, it's not like we haven't seen in these organizations a person blow out and take the whole organization down with them, where we may be moving away from that kind of thing where it's more of a collective instead of
And I think that one of the things I love about working at Hillsong Church is that most of these people with belief, they are a collective army, I would call them, of just committed people. And so no matter whether there are seasons where things are tough or seasons where they're enjoying, what they're doing, they're just very committed. We actually do have quite low turnover in our staff community.
Yeah, I think you pointed to this when you were saying, when you get everybody kind of pointed in the direction of their talents and everybody's pulling the same direction at the same time with kind of the same efforts, those conflicts probably are minimized. Doesn't mean there aren't any conflicts, but right, you get people moving in kind of that common direction. Deanna asked a question, your workforce mix, you mentioned millennials a lot. I mean, they do make up a majority of the workforce.
Yes.
But is that if you were to kind of say your generational mix in your staff, is it fairly even? Does it lean heavily towards millennials? What does your generation look like, or your generation makeup look like?
Well, in our congregation, it's quite heavy millennial. in our staff community, I would agree it is a mix. I think one of the reasons I keep talking about millennials is that the church I now see, which is our vision statement for Hillsong, Pastor Brian talks a lot about about the idea of generational legacy and empowering the next generation and keeping this young spirit about who we are. And so I think subconsciously, actually, as I've been sitting here, I've been so focused on that as a goal. But the truth is we have older people in our staff community, and they do represent a large part of who we are as well.
Yeah. And I joke about it, but really Xers want what the millennials want, to be honest.
I'm an Xer and I do.
Yeah, I know. Totally.
Yeah, that's right. It's true. Yeah.
No, I hear that all the time. And I think it's one of those things we need to realize in the leadership roles. It's like, we really all want these things. And so when you're providing them for those groups, and let it float to the top. Because oftentimes they want it as well. Andrea had asked for when you were talking about coaching middle managers, is that something, and as you think about your coaching your managers, done individually, done in a group basis, maybe a combination of both, and what are you finding effective in that coaching with your managers?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. We tend to call it performance coaching because this coaching, all sorts of coaching these days. And we just like people to understand that, what we're there to do is to help them perform at their peak. So with some campuses, we do a combination of managers who feel like they are buddies on the job. And there might be a small group of 4. And then with other leaders, we'll do a one-on-one. Our biggest approach, I would say, has turned into aiming it at something specific. So we either aim it based on 180-degree feedback from their leader, or we aim it at a particular set of competencies. And what we are starting to tell our leaders when it comes to a competency framework is that if there is, for example, 10 competencies that as a middle manager we would prefer you to have, you don't have to feel like you have to be all those. Let's go back to strengths. Let's look at your strengths and let's look at which of those strengths are going to build which competencies and find team to help you with the others. So a lot of our coaching is around that. Nobody trying to be the hero. And sometimes people need permission for that. We can sometimes work so isolated and we set such high expectations of ourselves that we want to be the perfect leader. So a lot of our philosophy is around getting groups of middle managers understanding they don't have to be the perfect leader. They can rely on team. It's all about self-awareness.
Yeah.
There is a common thread that runs through this generation of a little bit of anxiety, and we're seeing it now creep into the management levels. Are you dealing with that? Is that something you guys, one of the things I'm hearing, I really like, you've taken this approach and made it your own. So you've taken our materials and blended them and have kind of owned it for what it is. It works in your organization. But have you had any issues with that in working through some of these young leaders and some of the anxiety they're bringing maybe to the work culture?
I think anxiety these days is such a broad term, right? It can mean so many things. Do our leaders feel the weight, the emotional weight of carrying so much? When I say so much, I mean we are a highly people-focused organization, and we have young people who are leading, who are in their 30s, and they're going to all sorts of crisis situations. So does that come up? Yes, it does. And I think that's where the tool we created, which is our energy cards, has things like that help a lot. Trying to just be self-aware. I'm surprised how much self-awareness plays a huge part in overcoming even anxiety, in terms of not clinical anxiety. I will pause there, but I'm talking about the common anxieties that come with wanting to be a great leader. But being able to look and understand yourself, your patterns of thinking, your patterns of feeling, and then how to sort of appreciate them and also nurture them and rest. I mean, that's a return on investment tool right there.
Yeah, my 19-year-old daughter who listens to these programs, by the way, which is
Yes.
crazy. She too this has been a year of learning, first year of college for her,
Wow.
and she's learning to deal with these anxieties that she has. That same model, she very, very similar, being aware of it, being able
Right.
to work with it, calling it what it is, working in that framework has been very, very beneficial. And we're seeing each instance being better than the last. And it doesn't mean it's completely gone, but it's we got better. We were more effective. And I think you guys are seeing that in your leadership model where that can be measured and tracked. Because you are Q12 customers, I have to ask you, how's the best friend at work question going for you guys? Because that's a question we get all the time, right? Best friend at work.
Yep.
You would think in a church that would be perfect. So 5-0 across the board, everybody's best friends.
The answer on our campuses that we have done the Q12, the answer is actually we've hit between, I might not exaggerate. So between 70 and 98% of the database. So we're in the green.
Good.
Yeah, I was surprised and happy that.
Did you get any pushback on that question? We get it. We get tons of pushback.
And I frame it differently, especially. Well, I shouldn't say especially, but Australians like to be quite frank in their language. And so I had to sort of say, look, when it comes to best friend, what we mean by that is someone who's got your back. You know that person's for you. And then everyone was like, oh, okay, I can answer that. Yeah.
Good. Well, Anne, we're out of questions from the chat room here, or actually we're out of time. So let's wrap this up.
Yeah, absolutely. Daniela, thank you so much for being here today. You've given us a lot of gems that people I'm sure will be pleased. As we close it, is there anything that I should have asked or anything that you feel like we really need to get across before we say goodbye?
I think one thing I would love to just share is that the tools that Gallup produces and provides are just so helpful that, if you're out there and you're listening, just get your hands on them. They're free, a lot of them, and they really make your work so much easier. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that. It's been a great a show to be able to share with you, and thank you for all of your great experience in sharing it. And we certainly appreciate you guys. So yeah, that's it for us.
All right.
Nice to meet you, Jim.
Yeah, it's great to meet you as well. We'll see you at the summit, by the way.
Yes, I was going to say.
Yeah, no, we will look forward to seeing you at the summit. And thanks for the work that you do. I was telling you in the pre-show, Hillsong has had an enormous impact, especially in the church in America over the last 20 years. It's pretty amazing, some of the work that you guys are doing. So keep at it. Exciting that Strengths is a part of it. Exciting that you're measuring that through Q12, and we appreciate the work that you do. Hang tight for me 1 second. I'll remind everyone to take full advantages of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. So just gallupstrengthcenter.com. Send us your questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. You can just email those to us, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget, you can catch the recorded audio and video of this program. If you missed some parts of this, you can just go back and rewind it on YouTube and listen to it. Rewind. That's kind of an old term. The past ones you can, all of our social resources. It's funny how many people say, is this being recorded to tape? And I'm like, it's been a long time since we've recorded anything to tape. Just a reminder, all our social resources available for you at the coach's blog. Just go to coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, we mentioned that several times here on the program. All the courses that lead to that. In fact, we have an ASC course going on in Omaha right now that I get to visit tomorrow morning. I'm super excited about that. You can get registered for those. Courses.gallup.com is the website to get that done. If you have any questions about it, there's a contact form right there on the live page. Don't forget to visit us on our Facebook page as well. Daniela, you can join us as soon as you're done with the MBA, not sooner. Okay, no, not sooner than that. Facebook.com/groups/called to coach. We'll get you there as well. Many of you have been coming in off the webcast, so we appreciate you doing that as well. We look forward to the next Call to Coach. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.